Good morning, everyone. In the last session, we discussed about auto wiring, qualifier, and primary. So, how many places we can use auto wiring? At how many places we can use auto wiring? Any idea? Auto wiring can be used at three places. One is at the setter method level, another one is at the constructor level, third one is at the field level. If you use auto wide annotation at the setter method level, then it will use setter injection. Okay. If we use auto wide annotation at the variable level, it is going to perform field injection. Field injection means internally it will use reflection API to inject the value to the variable. Okay. Now, fine guys. One second. Mr. Kudip Kumar, can you unmute your mic? Kudip Kumar, can you unmute your mic?
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Can you share your screen? Show me what is the problem you are facing. Yes, sir. Can you delete that project? Delete it. There is a delete option below the below the paste. Above. Yeah, delete it. Okay. And one second. Can you open your command prompt and can you show me which version of Java you have installed? Java version. JDK 1. Java version 1.8. Okay. Can you do Maven? Do you have Maven installed?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
MVN space -v. Yeah, fine. Now create the Java project now using Maven. Spring Starter project. Yeah, that's fine. Next, click on next. Don't select anything. Yeah, click on next. Click on finish. Go to pom.xml. Spring Boot starter test. Can you do one thing instead of 2.7.1? Can you make it as 2.5.2 in the 8th line? 2.5.2. Yeah, right click on your Maven project and update it. Go to your project.
Sir.
Maven, there is a Maven option. Update project. Select force update. Yeah, can you run your project now? Right click on your project. Run as boot app. No, your project started.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, fine. Anyone else facing any other issues, guys? So can you please raise your hand? while practicing? Are you guys facing any issues? Anyone else facing any issue? So when your project is having some issue, whenever you create the Maven project, right click on that Maven project and use Maven force update. Then it will download the dependencies again. Then the problem will be solved. All right. I'm sharing my screen. Can you see the screen now? Yes. Yes. Okay. So look at this. We have report DAO is a interface. Report DAO is a interface. Now we have a report service. Report DAO is injected to report service by using auto wiring. Where we are writing the auto wiring annotation? Auto wiring annotation. Auto wiring annotation. I'm writing at the variable level. When we write auto wide annotation at the variable level, it is injecting the value to the variable directly. Now, here our variable is a private variable. Our variable is a private variable. How IOC container will inject the value to the private variable from outside? Can we access private variable outside of the class, or we cannot access the private variables outside of the class? Can we access the private variables outside of the class, or we can't access private variables outside of the class? As per Java OOPS principles, we cannot access private variables outside of the class. Then how? Here IOC injecting the value to this variable. I am writing the variable. I'm writing the variable. For that variable, I'm writing auto wide annotation. So when we write auto wide annotation at the variable level, here IOC container will use reflection API. IOC will use reflection API to initialize the variable. IOC will use reflection API to perform field injection. IOC will use reflection API to perform field injection. IOC will use reflection API internally to perform field injection. Okay. Now here guys, note field injection is not recommended. Field injection is not recommended because it is violating OOPS principles and it breaks single responsibility principle. So first thing is it is not respecting OOPS principles. As per the OOPS, if a variable is declared as a private, that variable should not be accessed outside of the class. But in this scenario, whenever we declare this variable private with auto void, this variable value is getting initialized. Variable getting initialized from outside. That means we are breaking OOPS principle. And the second one is like this, we can initialize multiple classes also in the future because multiple developers are going to work on the project. So multiple developers will be initializing multiple objects into single class. That means it is going to violate single responsibility principle. One class should perform only one action. That is the rule we need to follow. Single responsibility principle. One class should perform only one action. But here, multiple developers can inject multiple objects by using auto wiring. When we do the code review also, it is not going to identify the issue when you go for field injection. That's why field injection is not recommended because it is violating OOPS principles. It is violating OOPS principles and it breaks a single responsibility principle. when multiple people in perform, when multiple objects, injected using field injection, when multiple objects injected using field injection, code review tools, code review tools cannot identify complexity, cannot identify complexity. So that's why it is not recommended. Now, generally, we have three types of dependency injections. One is setter injection, second one is constructor injection, and the third one is field injection. Setter versus constructor versus field, right? Setter injection will be performed through setter method. Setter injection will be performed, setter injection will be performed through setter method, will be performed through setter method. Constructor injection will be performed through constructor. Constructor injection will be performed through constructor. Field injection will be performed through reflection API. Field injection will be performed through reflection API. Okay. If we don't specify auto void at the setter, then setter method will not be completed. It is mandatory to specify auto void annotation. It is mandatory to specify auto void annotation at setter method. So when you want to perform setter injection, then it's mandatory to specify auto void annotation at the setter method. Setter injection will be performed through setter method. It is mandatory to specify auto void annotation at the setter method. If we don't specify auto void, if we don't specify auto void annotation, then DI will not happen. DI will not happen. This is called as partial injection. Partial injection. So that means if you have two dependents, you have written the setter method for one method. You have written setter at one setter method. You forgot you specified auto wiring at one setter method. You forgot to specify auto wiring at the second setter method. Okay, you specified the auto while at one setter method, you forgot to specify auto wiring at the another setter method, then dependency injection will not happen. Dependency injection will not happen. So if we don't specify auto while annotation, then DI will not happen. That means here partial injection is going to happen. It leads to, if DI not happened, if DI not happened, then when we call methods, we will get a null pointer exception. We will get null pointer exception. Okay, now see here, for this variable, I'm going to write a setter method. For this variable, I'm going to write a setter method. Now here, I'm not going to use auto void annotation. I'm writing a variable. For that variable, I'm writing a setter method. Here, when I'm calling this class, when I'm executing this project, I'm going to get a null pointer exception. Why we are getting null pointer exception? I have not specified auto void at this method. When I did not specify auto void at this method will not be called. If this method is not called, then this variable will be null. When the variable is null, null dot method, we are going to get a null pointer exception. We are going to get the null pointer exception. Are you guys clear with my point? What is a partial injection when you go for setter method? If you don't specify auto void at this method, then this method will not be called. Then dependency injection will not happen. And here, when we go for setter injection, target bean will be created first. Target bean will be created first. Then setter will be called. Then setter method will be called. Then setter method will be called to inject dependent. Setter injection will be performed through setter method of target. It is mandatory to specify auto void annotation at setter method. If we don't specify auto void annotation, then DI will not happen. Partial injection is possible here. If DI not happened, then when we call the methods, if we DI not happened, then if we call methods, then we will get null pointer exception. Target bean will be created first, then setter method will be called to inject a dependent. So if you have this setter injection, I'm having auto wiring. Auto wiring I'm writing at the setter method level. So in order to call this setter method, first this target object should be created. So people will say, when we go for setter injection, target object will be created first, then dependent object will be created. Okay, for example, if I remove this and if I go for constructor concept, constructor using fields, I'm going to write a constructor with the fields. Okay, constructor injection. Constructor injection will be performed through constructor. Constructor injection will be performed through constructor. If we have more than one constructor, then we have to specify auto void at a constructor level. If we have more than one constructor, then we have to specify auto void at the constructor level. If we have only one parameterized constructor, if we have only one parameterized constructor, then at auto void is optional. At auto void is optional. In CI, that means in the constructor injection, target bean will be created first, or dependent bean will be created in CI. Dependent bean will be created first. Dependent bean will be created first, then target bean will be created. Why? Because in order to create the object, for report service is my target. Report service is my target. In order to create the object for the report service, this constructor should be called. In order to call this constructor, first this DAO object should be created. If the DAO object is created, then only this constructor can be called, then only this object will be created. So that means when we go for constructor injection, first dependent bean object will be created, then only target bean object will be created. Are you guys understanding here? Fine. Partial injection is not possible. Partial injection is not possible in CI. That means if we have a constructor with a parameter, definitely this object will be injected. Without injecting the dependent object, target object cannot be created. Whereas if you go for the setter method, without calling the setter method, first a target object will be created. After target object is created, setter method may be called or may not be called, depends upon your annotation. If you don't write auto void at the setter method, then it will not be called. Then dependency injection will not happen. Partial injections. If you specify auto wiring at one setter method, if you don't specify at another setter method, partial injections will happen. And in the setter method, always target bean object will be created first. Whereas when you come to the constructor, so in order to create the object for the target, constructor should be called. In order to call the constructor, dependent object should be passed. So here, partial injection is possible, partial injection is not possible. Guys, when we go for constructor injection, partial dependency injection is possible or partial dependency injection is not possible. Partial dependency injection is possible or partial dependency injection not possible. When we have a constructor with two parameters, is it mandatory to inject the two dependents? Yes, it is mandatory to inject those two dependents. Partial injection is not possible when you go for constructor injection. Partial injection is possible when we go for setter injection. Partial dependency injection possible in setter, but it is not possible in constructor. Field injection will be performed through reflection API. Field injection violating OOPS principles. Okay, private variable is initializing from outside of the class through reflection. Private variable getting initialized from outside, using reflection. So that's why field injection is not recommended. But in most of the projects, people will use field injection. Field injection is simple to use. It is simple to use. It is simple to use because just one line, just we are going to write one line. If you write @autovide at the variable, then that's fine. Dependency injection is going to happen. What is meaning of partial injection? Partial injection means my target class is dependent on two other classes. Only one class is injected, another class is not injected. That is called partial injection. Okay. My bean is dependent on two classes. Only one class is injected, another class is not injected. That is called partial dependency injection. Can you guys please read these points? Setter injection versus constructor injection versus field injection. Understood, guys? Now tell me which one is recommended in all these three. Which one is recommended? People are asking how partial injection is possible. Arey Baba. Let's assume that here I am taking one dependent bean. Here I am taking another dependent bean. For these two dependent beans, I'm taking the setter methods. I'm taking the setter methods. Okay, or else I'm taking the setter methods. Two setter methods are available. Two setter methods are available. I'm specifying auto wiring only for one setter method. Now this one, let me call it as Oracle DAO IMPL. This one I'm calling as MySQL DAO IMPL. This one I'm calling as Oracle DAO IMPL. This one I'm calling as MySQL DAO IMPL. Okay. Now, am I specifying auto wiring? Am I specifying auto wiring for both setter methods, or I'm specifying auto wiring for only one setter method? Both objects will be injected in this scenario. Only one object will be injected in this scenario. Only one object. Can I say it is a partial dependency injection? Can I say it is a partial dependency injection? Programmer forgot to write the auto wiring for both setter methods. Then only one setter method will be called. Only one object will be injected. Only MySQL DAO IMPL will be injected. Oracle DAO IMPL will not be injected. Can we call it as a partial dependency injection? Can we call it as a partial dependency injection? Yes, it is a partial dependency injection. Understood. Now, instead of writing the setter methods, can I go for constructor? Both dependents I'm taking as constructor arguments. When I take them as constructor arguments, partial dependency injection possible. If I want to create the object, if IOC want to create the object for the report service, IOC should inject both dependents. It is mandatory now. So when we specify a constructor with two parameters, two dependent objects, those two dependent objects should be injected. It's mandatory. Without injecting these two dependent objects, can this constructor will be executed? No. Constructor is having two parameters. So if those two parameters are supplied, then only that constructor can be called. That means both dependent objects are getting injected. Partial dependency injection is not possible here, but partial dependency injection possible when you go for setter. Got the clarity? Guys, did you get the clarity? What is partial dependency injection? How it is possible in the setter? Why it is not possible in the constructor? Yes, when you have two dependents, if you don't write the auto byte for the two setter methods, then objects will not be injected. Partial dependency injection will happen. When you write a constructor with two parameters, then both objects will be injected. Then only that constructor will be executed. Then only service object will be created here. So both dependents will be injected. Then only target object will be created. Okay, cool. Now, next one, field injection. Field injection, nothing but writing the auto byte annotation at the variable level. Writing the auto byte annotation at the variable level. I don't have a setter method. I don't have a parameter constructor to initialize the variable. So without setter method, without constructor, how this variable will be initialized? This variable will be initialized by using reflection API. Private variable is initializing from outside by using reflection variable, using reflection API. It is against OOPS principles. Here, IOC container initializing this variable through field injection. What is the meaning of field injection? Injecting the dependent object into target class variable. Target class variable is belongs to DAO. DAO IMPL object is available. the DAO IMPL object is initializing into this variable through this variable only. Earlier, this variable is initialized through setter. If this variable is initialized through setter, then that is called as a setter injection. If the variable is initialized through constructor, that is called constructor injection. But now this variable is initializing through that variable only. That is called variable injection. We can call it as a field injection. How this variable is initializing? It is a private variable. Na? Can we access private variable outside? Yes, by using reflection API, we can access private variables outside IOC container using that reflection API to initialize this variable. That is field injection. Is it recommended to use the field injection? Two problems are there. One is it is violating OOPS principles. Second one is it will break single responsibility principle also. What is that single responsibility principle? One class should perform only one action. But tomorrow, if you inject multiple dependents also, it cannot identify it in the code review. So out of all these dependency injections, constructor injection is recommended. Out of all these dependency injections, constructor injection is recommended. Constructor injection is recommended because partial injection is not possible, and target will be created after the dependent object is created. Target bean will be created if dependent bean is available. Out of all these dependency injections, constructor injection is recommended because partial dependency injection not possible, and target bean will be created if dependent bean is available. If the dependent bean is available, then only target bean will be created. Then only target bean will be created. Are you guys able to understand three dependency injections which we are using in the Spring framework? How IOC is performing these dependency injections? What is a setter? What is a constructor? And what is a field? Okay, now tell me, out of these three dependency injections, which dependency injection recommended? Which dependency injection is recommended? Constructor injection recommended. Okay, constructor injection is recommended because partial dependency injection is not possible, and target bean will be created if the dependent bean is available. Without having the dependent bean, target bean cannot be created. That means it is not going to support for partial injection. If the dependent bean is created, then only target bean will be created. So it is recommended to use constructor injections in the project. Okay, so now when we are going for constructor injection, is it mandatory to write the auto void annotation, or it is optional to write the auto void annotation? When we go for constructor injection, is it mandatory to write auto void, or it is optional? If we have only one parameterized constructor, then it is optional. If we have only one parameterized constructor, then it is optional. Okay, fine. Sir, I am writing one variable private integer age. Private integer age. Can I do auto wiring for this variable? Can I do auto void for this variable? Then what will happen? What will happen? What will happen now? See here. Can we do auto wiring for primitive data types? Can we do auto wiring for primitive data types, or we cannot do auto wiring for primitive data types? No. Auto wiring for primitive data types is not possible. Auto wiring supports only referenced data types. Auto wiring supports only referenced data types. Auto wiring is not for primitives. Okay, now note, note. Auto wiring supports only referenced types. Not supporting for, not support for primitive types. Auto wiring supports only reference types, no support for primitive types. So if you see, I am writing private int age variable. For the age variable, I am writing auto void. It is not supporting. So auto wiring we need to do only for reference type, not for primitive types. Very good. Fine. So with this, we understood what is dependency injection, what is a setter, what is a constructor, what is field, what is auto wiring, okay, and where we can use auto void annotation, for what type of variables we need to use auto wiring, all those things we discussed. The next concept is bean life cycle. The next concept is bean life cycle. Okay, bean life cycle. Can you guys tell me what is a bean? The Java class, which is managing by the IOC container, is called as a bean class. The Java class, which represented as bean, the Java class, which represented as Spring Bean, is called as bean class. Is called as bean class, or we can say the Java class, which is managing by the Java class which is managed by IOC is called as bean class. So in our project, we are creating several classes. For those classes, are we creating the objects and managing them? IOC container creating the objects and managing them. In our project, several classes are available, right? Like Oracle DAO IMPL is available. MySQL report DAO IMPL is available. Report service is also available. Now, are we creating the objects for these classes? Are we managing these classes? Are we creating the objects for these classes? Are we managing these classes? No. Who is managing these classes? IOC container, right? The Java class, which represented as a Spring Bean, is called as bean class. Okay, or the Java class, which is managed by IOC, is called as bean class. For spring beans, for spring beans, object creation and object destruction. For spring beans, object creation and object destruction will be taken care by IOC container. Object creation, object destruction will be taken care by IOC container. As part of this process, we can execute some lifecycle methods. Okay, so IOC container is creating the object for the bean. IOC container is removing the object of the bean. Okay, so whenever object is getting created or whenever object is getting removed, we can execute some lifecycle methods of the bean. So the Java class which is managed by IOC is called as a Spring Bean. Is called as Spring Bean. Is called as a Spring Bean. For Spring Beans, lifecycle for the Spring Beans will be managed by IOC container. Spring Beans lifecycle will be managed by IOC. That means object creation, object destruction will be taken care by IOC container. We can execute life cycle methods for Spring Bean. We can execute life cycle methods for Spring Bean. So when the object is created, I want to execute some logic. But before object is deleting, I want to execute some logic. So we can execute lifecycle methods for Spring Bean. So what is the meaning of lifecycle methods? When the bean object is created, I want to perform some operation. When the bean object is getting deleted, I want to perform some operation. Like this, we can perform some lifecycle operations on the bean. We can perform some lifecycle operations on the bean. Who is managing this lifecycle? Lifecycle is managing by IOC only. When you represent your Java class as a Spring Bean managing this life cycle. What is the meaning of managing the life cycle? Loading the class, creating the object, deleting the object, everything will be taken care by IOC container. As part of this life cycle, if you want to customize or if you want to perform some additional operations on the bean, then you can go for bean life cycle. We can work with the bean life cycle in Spring Boot. We can work with the bean lifecycle methods in two ways. In Spring Boot, we can work with bean lifecycle methods in two ways. One is by implementing interfaces. Second one is by using annotations. If you are going for interfaces concept, then here initializing bean and disposable bean, there are two interfaces available. We need to implement these interfaces. If you go for annotations, there is a concept called post construct and pre-destroy annotations are available. Post construct and pre-destroy available. I want to perform life cycle for a bean. How many ways we can perform the life cycle? We can execute the life cycle methods. We can execute the life cycle methods in two ways. One is by implementing interfaces, initializing bean interface available, disposable bean interface available. In the initializing bean, one abstract method available. In the disposable bean interface, one abstract method is available. So when you implement these interfaces, those lifecycle methods will be executed. When the object is created, one method will be executed. When the object is getting removed, another method will be executed. So if you don't want to go for interfaces, then you can go for annotations, post construct, pre-destroy. The name itself telling post construct, pre-destroy. When the bean object is created, then post construct annotation method will execute. I want to execute the logic when the bean object is created. Post construct. When the bean object is created, then the method will be executed, which is having this annotation. Pre-destroy. Before the bean object is removing, this method will be called. Let me show you both approaches, guys. One is by using annotation approach. Second one is by using that interface approach. File, new, Spring Starter project. Bean lifecycle. Bean lifecycle application. Next, finish. Right, project is created. If anybody facing issues, once the project is created, right click on the project, Maven, update the project, choose force update. Right click on the project, Maven, force update. All right. Now let me create one bean class, new class called motor. I'm keeping them in the beans package now. I'm taking a class with a name called motor class. Okay. Now I want to represent this class as a spring bean. So how to represent this class as a spring bean? By using component, we are representing this class as a spring bean. And I'm writing a zero param constructor to understand object creation. Motor constructor. Motor constructor. Right click. Now go to start class. I'm not doing anything here. Just I created a class called motor. For the motor class, I have specified at a component. Right click on this, run as boot application. Can you see motor constructor is executed? Am I creating object for the motor? IOC creating object for the motor. Am I creating object for the motor? IOC is creating object for the motor. IOC creating object for the motor. Okay, now, so who is managing the life cycle? Who is managing the life cycle of this bean? Life cycle managed by IOC container. I want to execute some life cycle methods. When the motor object is created, I want to execute some logic. When the motor object is removing, I want to execute some logic. First, let me go for interface concept. Implements initializing bean. So there is a interface called initializing bean. In that initializing bean, there is a method called after properties set. System.out.println after properties set method called. After properties set method called. After properties set method called. Okay. Now run the same application. Now I'm not going to do anything. Just I implemented one interface. In that I have written after properties set method. Run as boot application. Can you see that method called? Can you see that method called? Can we see that method called? Am I calling that method or that method called automatically? Programmer is calling this method or this method called automatically? This method called automatically. When this method will be called? After properties set. That means after your bean object completed, after your dependency injections completed, then after properties set will be called. This is one life cycle method. Whenever a bean object is created, I want to execute some logic on that bean. For example, when this bean object is created, I want to establish the database connection, or I want to read some file data. When this bean object is created, I want to perform some operation. Then you can go for initializing bean. Similarly, there is a one more interface called disposable bean. There is one more interface called disposable bean. In the disposable bean, we have destroy method. In the disposable bean, we have destroy method. System.out.println destroy method called. Destroy method called. When this destroy method will be called? You know servlet lifecycle methods, init method, service method, destroy method in the servlets. So similarly, here also lifecycle methods are available. So to implement lifecycle methods, here we have two options. One is by using interface. Second one is by using annotation. Initializing bean and disposable bean. Initializing bean having after properties set method. This method will be called after our bean object got created. Destroy method. This method will be called before the bean object is getting removed. Let's run our project. Run as boot application. Now see here, motor constructor. After that object created, after property set method called. Whenever my application is closing, then destroy method called. So these are life cycle methods. So when the bean object is created, I want to execute a logic to get the connection from the database. When the bean object is getting removed, I want to close the DB connection. Or after the bean object is created, I want to read the file data. When the bean object is getting removed. I want to close that file resources. So anything like that. So any lifecycle operations, if you want to perform, then you can go for bean lifecycle methods. So if you go for interface concept, then lifecycle methods can be implemented like this interface approach. This is interface approach. Observe these methods, guys. Guys, are you able to understand how to implement bean lifecycle by using interface concept? Yes, but is this recommended approach? Is this recommended approach? We are directly implementing the interfaces of the Spring. Our class is invasive. Our class is non-invasive now. Our class is tightly coupled with Spring framework interfaces. Our class is directly using the interfaces of the Spring framework. Instead of this, we can go for annotation approach. What is annotation approach? Here I'm taking one class called engine. Engine class I'm representing as a Spring Bean by using component. Here I'm writing the constructor for engine also. System.out.println engine constructor. Engine constructor. I'm writing like this. That's it. So see here, run as boot application. Run as boot application. Can you see? Engine constructor also called. I want to execute lifecycle methods for the engine. I want to execute lifecycle methods for the engine. When the engine object is created, I want to start the engine. When the engine object is removing, I want to stop the engine. Okay, here you can write any method. Public void init, public void init, method name your wish. Public void init system.out.println start engine. Start engine. And I'm writing one method public void destroy, public void destroy system.out.println stop engine. Start the engine and stop the engine. Okay, so these two methods are available. Let me execute this, run as boot application. Can you see init and destroy methods called? No. Engine start, engine stop. Start the engine, stop the engine. These methods are not called. Currently, these are normal methods. These are not lifecycle methods. Here in the motor, we implemented interfaces. So those interface methods are getting automatically called. When the application started, this bean is implementing the interfaces. This is a Spring Bean. These are the special interfaces. Lifecycle methods are available. So when a bean is implementing this interface, after the bean object created, this method will be called. When the bean is implementing disposable bean interface, before removing the bean object, destroy method will be called. But I don't want to implement the interfaces. I want to achieve life cycle without interfaces. Then we have annotation based approach. What are the annotations available? Post construct annotation is available. Pre-destroy annotation is available. Post construct. Guys, post construct is not a Spring annotation, first of all. It is from the Java X package. Post construct and pre-destroy. So these are not from the Spring framework. These are third-party annotations. So these are Java X annotations. When you write the Java X annotations, Spring is understanding that post construct means after the engine object created, it has to call the init method. Pre-destroy means before the bean object is removing, this method should be called. Method names can be anything. Here I can write the method name as ABC. Here I can write the method name as XYZ. Method name can be anything when you go for this annotations. So to perform life cycle methods execution. Now see, engine constructor created, engine start and stop engine. Life cycle methods are executing for the engine also. For motor, life cycle methods are executing. For engine also, life cycle methods are getting executed. How many ways we are able to achieve them? In two ways. One is through interface. One is through interface, and the second one is through annotation. Okay. Post construct and pre-destroy. Post construct pre-destroy available in Java X package, not from the Spring. So for recommended, for readability purpose, I'm writing the method name as init as well as destroy. That means init means when the bean object created, that method will be called as a post construct method, and a destroy pre-destroy means before the bean object is removing, that destroy method will be called. You can write start stop also, no problem. You can keep them as a start stop methods also. Whenever the bean object is created, that will be called. Now it is annotation approach. It is annotation approach. Control space. When I am doing the post construct, I will do control space. Then packages will be imported. Chaitanya, packages will not import automatically. We need to import the packages manually. I'm using a shortcut to import the packages. Control space, control shift to O shortcuts I'm using to import the packages. Got my point? So with this, how many ways we can achieve bean life cycle? How many ways we can achieve bean life cycle? In two ways we can achieve bean life cycle. Okay, fine guys. I'm uploading the class notes. So complete till today, entire notes is available here. You can download this class notes and you can practice. So notes uploaded guys. Bean life cycle concept. Okay, with this, I'm stopping for today. We will continue in the tomorrow session. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye bye.